Broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by theunshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome to this weekly edition of WilmsFront. Today is Wednesday the 16th of September 2020. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube and DLive channel, as well as on the Entropy software interface, where I've put the link in the description and the live chat. It is 7:15 here in Melbourne, where we now at what I'd term stage 3.9 lockdown, with the curfew now at 9 p.m. and we are now allowed out for 2 hours of exercise or social interaction per day, but you still must wear a mask at all times, and you're still only allowed within a 5-kilometre radius of your home. We're on track to move to what I call stage 3.8 on September 28, with the 14-day rolling case average now falling under the 50 threshold. Some reprieve has come for regional Victorians, with them leaping to step 3 of Dan Andrews' roadmap out of lockdown, which means that pubs, restaurants, cafes, hairdressers and beauty services can reopen from tomorrow. Private outdoor gatherings of 10 can take place, and household bubble visits of up to 5 can take place. Melbourne will not be taking this step until at least October 26, with the requirement that the 14-day case average will be at 5 daily new cases, which is an incredibly tough threshold to meet. Due to the stark differences now in restrictions in metro and regional areas, Victoria Police have said they are going to be strengthening the ring of steel around Melbourne, with more checkpoints and a new fine introduced for the offence of leaving a restricted area, which will be $4,957. Police have vowed if they don't get Melburnians leaving for regional Victoria at a checkpoint, local police in those areas will fine them and send them back to Melbourne. Today, we finally heard about a pathway to the resumption of elective surgery and dental checkups. That was announced by Health Minister Jenny Mikakos. It should have been announced long before this, because people haven't stopped falling sick from other diseases or ailments this year, and we now only have around 100 Victorians in hospital with coronavirus and 10 in intensive care. Dan Andrews, who in question about his slow roadmap out of lockdown and about considering other approaches to suppressing this second wave, has dug his heels in constantly. He doesn't care what any other so-called expert thinks, the concerns of business community or other House considerations, or as he said, the state of human rights. It's his way is the only way, and he will consider no alternative. Being put under house arrest in 2020 with all public protesting banned is certainly not what was on the ballot at the 2018 Victorian state election, but that is what the Andrews government has delivered unapologetically this year. Many who are rightfully outraged about how the Andrews government has conducted themselves throughout both waves of the coronavirus pandemic and the big stick, big government, nanny state, police state approach. Unfortunately, contrary to what some people have been calling for, there won't be a snap election. The Victorian governor won't sack Dan, nor will there be a federal military intervention to remove his government. Victoria has fixed 4-year parliamentary terms, so the next state election will not take place until Saturday, the 26th of November, 2022. Given the year we've had, that seems like an eternity away. But if 2020 has taught voters anything, it's that elections have consequences far greater than the value many place on their vote every election. Despite the alarming curtailment of our freedoms and civil liberties in Victoria, at present democracy has not been suspended. Local government elections are taking place throughout Victoria via mail-in voting this October, as were scheduled. You will get your voting ballot in the mail at your enrolled address, with each of the prospective candidates being featured in a brochure where they vaguely outline their vision for the local council area. My biggest issue with local government, the electoral system we have here in Victoria, is the lack of information, disclosure and transparency about political affiliations of each of the candidates. a candidate biography might not reveal if they are a Labor, Green or Socialist Party member hell-bent on raising your rates, spending your rates on their pet social justice projects and infringing on your property rights. Local government elections also have consequences, and in 2020, voters need to cast the most informed vote they have ever cast and need to make sure they do their own research on all the candidates on the ballot. Local government is the level of government that has the least amount of scrutiny by the media, and so by extension, it's one of the least accountable. How does local government operate in Victoria, and how can you make sure that you cast an informed vote this October? Well, to answer that question and to help answer your questions, my guest tonight is Liberal Councillor for the City of Greater Dandenong, who is, by extension, running for re-election to the council, Timothy Dark. Welcome.
Hello, how are you going?
I'm doing as well as one can be in lockdown Melbourne, which, well, as I reminded our audience at the beginning, we're pretty much under another 6 weeks of it until at least October 26th. As I said, it's basically lockdown 3.9.
It is definitely.
Now, you're actually in the City of Greater Dandenong Council building to appear on this show tonight, so you are still allowed to do council constituent work on the premises during stage 4?
So there's a couple of things that are allowed, particularly as a councillor under the local government exceptions that are included for constituent operations and things where items are needed, or to be able to have conversations with constituents. The council building is still there. Dandenong Council has put into place a significant amount of resources. So we've now got hand sanitizers, checkpoints. It's mandatory to wear a mask when outside of the office. And I'm currently sitting inside my office. But the second I walk out to any of the common areas, it's masks on, socially distanced and that sort of thing.
Are you able to move just back to the center a bit? You're falling off the screen.
There you go.
Thanks. Excellent. Now, the way that local government operates in Victoria is that, well, every local government area, whether they're a city, a shire, or a borough, has roughly around about 9 to 15 elected local councillors. Sometimes they come from single wards, sometimes multi-member wards, but you're all part-timers. You all have your day jobs, and the actual running of the council is left to a chief executive who is appointed by the elected council, and then there's a bunch of senior managers who assist with the operation from it. I've always had a problem with this type of operation of local government because, well, as I just said, you've all got your day jobs. You only get a part-time salary, and you essentially have full-time bureaucrats running everything while you're juggling your day job and also answering constituent calls, emails, and everything.
Correct. So you basically, when you're elected a councillor, so depending which municipality you're for, some currently have multi-member wards and some have single councillor wards. There is a new Local Government Act that the Daniel Andrews government was able to ram through Parliament a short time ago, and that has actually changed the area. So there's about 10 councils that are moving to single councillor wards. Dandenong Council is one of those. And then in line for the next state election, so the next council elections in 2024, then it'll be moving to single councillor wards across the whole state, unless they're in a regional centre, in which case they can remain as one unsubdivided ward, or if there's an exception that the minister can then grant.
What is the reason for this, and what's your opinion on this? Because you're the sole Liberal on the Dandenong City of Greater Dandenong City Council. There's 9 Labor, 1 Liberal, which is you, and 1 Green. But you were elected as part of a multi-member ward. So obviously, in what still is at the moment a safe Labor area, or it would appear on the face of it, your re-election chances have taken a hit.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. So no matter where you go in the state, no matter whether it's rural or metropolitan, generally there's always approximately 25 to 30% of the vote is a Liberal vote. In every single booth that you see in a state and federal election, it's very much the same. So in a multi-member ward, the requirement you have is to get, say, 3 councillors from one ward, means that you'd have to get approximately 26% to be able to get elected. Now that's because that when you get to the 78, 79% of the votes being counted, there's nobody else that can get elected. So a multi-member ward, in my opinion, always benefits the Liberal Party quite well. It benefits the Labor Party because it ensures you can get a Labor candidate up as well. And then usually the third spot's open for the fight as to whoever preferences flow and how they go. In a single councillor ward, the requirement is you need to get 50% of the vote. 50% is a significant challenge, particularly given that the area that I represent encompasses the suburbs of Noble Park and of Keysborough, and that has a very strong Labor stronghold. On the state election booth analysis, if you compare that to other areas, the state electorate of Keysborough, which belongs to Martin Pakula, is one of the safest Labor seats in the state. It's stronger and more Labor than some of the suburbs and the electorates that are out west. So certainly we're 38 days before the closure and before votes start being counted on the 24th of October. But certainly I'm going to go as hard as I possibly can, but it's going to be definitely a strong challenge.
Obviously, when the first lockdown began, there was a push for local council meetings to happen virtually on Zoom, but the legislation actually had to be changed to allow that. Yep.
Yeah, so the Local Government Act is an act of state parliament. The new Local Government Act, in my personal opinion, is very, very pro-Labor and pro-ALP. And that's been done in a couple of reasons, no doubt to consolidate the base that they've currently got. And that's because the Labor Party, along with the Greens, have acknowledged that local government, one, is a very powerful organisation if they get the majority numbers on it, and two, has significant sway and pull when it comes to being able to do certain things. So that's become, I suppose, a key topic of where local government is heading at the moment.
And what are the rules about campaigning at the moment? I mean, local government elections in the past, they have none of the feel of a state or federal election where there's signage everywhere. It's always basically been a ghost campaign. Most people don't know who's on the ballot until they get, as I said, that information pack, and it doesn't have party affiliation listed on the ballot. And as I said in my introduction, it just has that blurb on it where most of the candidates have these vague motherhood statements that I want this city or shire to be the best place to live, blah, 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 blah. And for all you know, they could be the most hard left person on the ballot, but they might say these nice and sweet things in their candidate blurb.
Correct. So you allowed a candidate statement under the Local Government Act and the campaign guidelines that they've allowed. The current restrictions, which is being led by the new Minister for Local Government since the demise of Adam Symerich, is the inability to be able to campaign, which has really worked against any potential candidates running for council, and it is suited to benefit the incumbents. So until Monday this week, before that, it was basically illegal to campaign. You weren't able to do any letterboxing. You weren't able to stick any signs up. You were really only constrained to what you could put out on social media. Now, the city of Greater Dandenong is Australia's most multicultural municipality. We've got 160 different nationalities, and the majority of those aren't on social media. So a lot of them weren't aware of what was going on until they get information coming out from the Victorian Electoral Commission, or they get something from a candidate in their letterbox, which they've just allowed now. Now, the minister, under his directions from Monday this week, allows candidates to be able to letterbox for 2 hours a day during their prescribed 2-hour exercise. And that's the only time that they're allowed to campaign and put things in letterboxes. They're not allowed to door knock. They're not allowed overly to be able to get involved with and have any conversations with residents unless you're socially distanced and wearing masks. You also need to make sure you've got a little bottle of hand sanitizer, and that's actually in the minister's directions when you go out. So there's all sorts of guidelines they're putting in place. With the second part of your question, you're definitely right. Candidate statements that go out and poster votes, most of the time, if they're ALP, they're written by the Labor Party. They're written by members of the Labor Party, whether they be MPs, affiliates of Trades Hall, or people who are heavily linked. To give you an idea, the city of Kingston being next to us, next to the Greater Dandenong, which goes from Patterson Lakes all the way up to Clorinda, the Labor Party has appointed Steve Michelson from Michelson Alexander to run his campaign. And he's running all of the ALP campaigns throughout the whole area. And you'd see a lot of the candidates running, they're using information, they're using different colours, which can actually, which is deliberately being done to misconstrue who a candidate really is. We had something very, very similar here in Greater Dandenong in 2016 with my Greens colleague. He is a member of the Greens, was previously a candidate for the Greens, and if you Googled him, you'd see that. But in his campaign, he acknowledged that the area that you would run was not going to elect a Green. And it's a very conservative area, and that was evident in a lot of the recent things we've seen. And he actually ran, I would say, almost as an independent Liberal. And I've grabbed some stuff here, and I'll hold it up to the camera to give you an idea. Whilst he ran, you've got here in blue writing that he's the Greens, he's a Liberal basically. It's blue, he's wearing a suit, delivering for Red Gun. That says absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he's a Green. And then the same thing with this one as well. You'll see that he's lobbying for things such as a community hub, for a high school, advocating campaigns, and nowhere here at all does it say that he's a Green. And so people voted for him in good faith, thinking that he would represent their values. He seemed to be a conservative family man. And then he gets elected and he's what would be arguably a hardcore Green. So they're definitely, I would say to anybody who is going into elections, to definitely do some research on all of the candidates running. There's always going to be running mates, and the Labor Party is the absolute best when it comes to that. They will deliberately run 3 or 4 running mates with a lead candidate. And the lead candidate will be the one that has most of the paraphernalia being put into your letterboxes. And usually a running mate will be somebody who will just have their name on the ballot paper, and their job is to purely get 400 or 500 votes and to send those votes straight away to the lead candidate.
There's definitely a lot of room for reform in the areas of transparency and disclosure of party affiliation. As you just said, with the current local government act, it seems to suit the Labor Party fine. But obviously with this local government election, when we're still under basically stage 4 lockdown, government intrusion into our lives has occurred like nothing else before. And given the fact that the lockdowns has thrown many out of work, and obviously with not much to do, they've got the perfect opportunity to do their own research, become informed. I'm not sure if you're aware of public choice theory economics, their theory of the rationally ignorant voter, because they're so busy living their lives that they're not bothered to be informed by politics. But given that, well, a lot of people lost their jobs because of the federal and state government policies, particularly this second shutdown here in Melbourne, the state government, they certainly, it is rational for them to be informed this election.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is going to be a very, very interesting election on a couple of different fronts. One being that a lot of people at the moment are home. It is a postal election, so people I think will have time to be able to get on Facebook, have a look, get on Google, search for some candidates, see what they can do and make sure that the person best represents their values. In 2016, when I ran for council, it was an attendance vote. It was not a postal election. And a lot of the people who turned up at the polling booth on election day were people who actually had no idea who they were voting for. They just knew that they didn't come and vote, they're going to get a fine, and they turned up and said, I'll make my decision when I turn up and I'll go from there. And that's a really interesting part to see, because a lot of people are not totally accustomed to the role and the power that local government has. I consider local government to be an excellent training school, if you will, for people who are interested in politics, interested in governance, because as you said before, it doesn't attract a significant amount of media coverage. You're still able to maintain a personal life, do whatever you want in your daytime during your main career, and then at night time, you're able to attend functions, represent your community, and to advocate for policies which you fiercely believe are the best things for your municipality. And when I ran in 2016 and was successfully elected, and I'm the first Liberal ever elected to the city of Greater Dandenong in its 25-year history, it was a shock for, I think, to a lot of the Labor colleagues. The councillor that I succeeded was a local high school teacher who'd been on the council for 17 years. He had a significant amount of a profile, but these days people want somebody who's going to fight for their values. They want somebody who's going to be energetic, who's actually going to get out and about, who's going to make sure that the community are represented, and they're going to make sure that there's not this big waste load that goes on within local government going to keep occurring.
I'm not sure if you've come across or actually met local Southeast Melbourne community activist Simon Johnson in his Southeast Community Forum. There's a lot of posts about who is running for local government elections, where their political affiliations actually lie, and as you just said, the fake blue candidates, whether they be wearing blue shirts or having blue election materials, but obviously given the current political animosity towards the Andrews government, I doubt there's going to be much local election campaign material in red.
Nobody's going to be using red whatsoever. And you're correct, absolutely correct. A lot of the Kingston candidates who are actively campaigning at the moment, there's one running in the Caruana ward, which covers, I believe, Dingley Village. And if you have a look at that, everything is dark blue. It's a Liberal blue. His photos of his suits, everything that you would see that he's a Liberal running for Dingley Village, which historically carries a large Liberal vote. And he's a member of the ALP. His campaign's being run by Steve Michelson from Michelson Alexander. And when he gets, if he does happen to get elected, then he will be required under the Labor Party constitution to follow the ALP policies that they allow. You certainly are right that there's a lot of duds, and a lot of the ones who are members of the Labor Party have refused Labor Party endorsement, which is interesting. Now, my opinion, the reason why is because if they're identified as a Labor candidate, the ALP is not very popular at the moment. I think they're worried about that. And you also see that I know the mayor of the city of Kingston, who's a card-carrying member of the Labor Party and very, very active in ALP politics, she's using a yellow colour palette for everything. Her partner, who's also a councillor in the city of Kingston, is using a Liberal blue, and he's wearing a blue shirt and I think jeans or pants in his photo, and they've erected a big billboard where on one side she's wearing yellow, he's wearing blue on the other side. And to any other innocent bystander, anybody looking, we think that they're non-political, they're members of the community, not knowing that they're hardcore members of the Labor Party.
Well, for those who know the color codes of political philosophy, obviously blue is associated with conservatism. Yellow, in my view, is associated with libertarianism. And obviously there's nothing libertarian in the Victorian Labor Party at the moment.
Oh, no. Oh, no. No, and that's what we're currently up against. You see, the Labor Party is very attuned to local government. They've been in the space for a very long time. They dominate the organisations that are there to support local government, with the VLGA, the Victorian Local Governance Association, and the MAV being the Municipal Association of Victoria. Both of those organisations carry a significant pull across government policy. They oversee and represent all local governments, which runs into the billions of dollars worth of money collected a year, billions of dollars worth of infrastructure, and it's dominated by the Labor Party. So the unfortunate side is that I think a lot of people had sort of thought that local government had a space and potentially had gotten quite big, and there's been a lot of cost shifting, no question. But I think we're at a point now where it's going to be critical to get more Conservatives and Liberals elected to local government to ensure that they can then represent the values of the community they're going to serve.
You and I, we would be too young to remember Victoria's council amalgamation under Jeff Kennett, Liberal Premier in 1994, where the amount of councils was significantly reduced. I don't know I haven't got it in front of me, the exact figure, but it was basically every 3 council roughly became 1 council. And obviously we've seen in New South Wales and Queensland, council amalgamations are extremely unpopular, you yourself obviously being a local councillor and knowing the workings of governance, what's your opinion on whether local government areas should be small or big?
Look, I think that, and when I was young and I was involved in student politics, I'm pretty sure that somebody will find that there's no minutes where I supported local government being kept back to the basics. Over time, local government has been the shifting ground for both state and federal governments, both Liberal and Labor. They've both shifted incredible amount of resources onto local government. In my opinion, local government is the closest to the people. It represents a smaller portion, and it has a significant amount of budgetary requirements, which we have. Previously, to give you an idea, the city of Greater Dandenong comprised of the city of Springvale, the city of Dandenong, and then some other parts of other municipalities as well. And then with the Kennett merger, it became the city of Greater Dandenong. Centred in Dandenong, we still have significant facilities in Springvale. But to give you an idea, once the amalgamation went through, there was invariably a double up of resources. What we have now is a budget that's about $170 million a year, and we have complete control over that as councillors. We can direct funds towards certain projects in the capital improvement space, certain social policy projects, advocating for things as well. It's become quite a powerhouse. And a lot of people have had the saying that local governments are relevant, should stick back to roads, rates, and rubbish, or it should be abolished, and we should just revert back to state and federal. I'm probably more of the opinion these days. I think it's probably worthwhile having more Liberals involved in local government. In my opinion, local government's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. It's only going to become bigger, and it's only going to grow as the governments shift more and more services away from the federal and state governments and cost shift more onto local government authorities. So I think that at the moment, it's definitely a space where we have a lot of potential to get more Conservatives, more Liberals onto the council. It's across the whole state. It's just a matter of getting them up.
Well, as things currently stand, the reason why local government is unpopular is they're only in the news when they do something ludicrous, and particularly those inner city councils in Melbourne, such as Yarra, Moreland and Darwin, with their anti-Australia Day motions, which the federal government, given that they are the ones that authorise citizenship ceremonies, has basically said, look, you either celebrate Australia Day or you can't conduct citizenship ceremonies. And obviously, when a lot of people on the right see that, they just see, well, this is what you get with local government. All of these local greenies and socialists and Labor people taking it over to utilise for their pet causes. And obviously, Australia's National Day is not something a local council should decide. I remember, was it years back now in New South Wales, the former Marrickville Council decided to endorse their boycott, divestment, sanctions on Israel. What's that got to do with a council in inner Sydney?
Correct. So look, there's certainly in the inner city, Darebin, Yarra, you name it, there's certainly some Greens councillors. And the reason why the Greens councillors are there, in line with what we've got at the moment, we've got Socialist Alliance running, Socialist Alternative, the Victorian Socialists. There's all these groups running in those Yarra inner city areas. And they run because it's an area that they know they can poll somewhat quite well. It may be a breeding ground for them to then look at moving into different politics. And you're right, they do take very strong political positions in terms of voting against Australia Day, voting to cancel the Australia Day services. And local governments are the ones who conduct the citizenship ceremonies on behalf of the community, on behalf of the federal government. So we receive a letter from the Minister for Border Protection, which is Peter Dutton, and we then basically conduct the citizenship ceremonies on his behalf under delegation. Now, those inner city Greens ones, they move their motion, got a lot of media coverage. In Greater Dandenong, I've lodged a notice of motion almost at the same time, saying that Greater Dandenong reaffirms our position to celebrate Australia Day on the 26th of January. And that was covered and carried by the majority of my colleagues, with the exception of my Greens colleague, invariably because of his beliefs and his political alignment. But it certainly shows where candidates lie, and also it gives you the provision to be able to reassert positions and conservative positions on local governments as well.
Going back to, as I described, the system of local government we have in Victoria, it's described as the council manager system, where there's an elected council, but they appoint a manager and other senior managers to run the daily operations. That's in contrast with what's called the strong mayor council system, which is what most cities in the United States have. For example, the mayor of New York is full-time, and obviously city authorities in the US, they run a lot more, including the local police department. But if you want a local equivalent of what I term a stronger mayor council system, you look at Queensland's when they amalgamated their local councils in 2007. Just before the pandemic shutdowns were complete, they had local government elections, and there is much more disclosure in Queensland about who's affiliated with what party. A Brisbane City Council, it's well known that the LNP has a majority, and there's a much more visible media scrutiny of it. And obviously that allowed back in 2011 Campbell Newman to make the leap from Lord Mayor of Brisbane to Premier of Queensland. So what Queensland has, it seems to, well, those sort of reforms that they had, which was actually introduced by the Beattie government, they have allowed much more transparency and by extension scrutiny of local government in that state.
Yeah, definitely. Look, the mayor with every municipality is a full-time position. Councillors receive about 30,000 per annum. That's a council allowance before tax, and then you pay tax on that. The mayor of every municipality receives a salary, look, in the ballpark around 100,000 per year. On top of that, they also have an office, an executive assistant in the car, and that's across every municipality across Melbourne that I'm aware of has got the same sort of thing. The Lord Mayor in the City of Melbourne operates on a slightly different structure, that being that businesses have more votes than residents that live there, and their system is sort of skewed differently as well. Look, I think that local government is an excellent way to be able to, if you call it, say, training wheels, to learn how things operate, learn how governance operates and get things going. The most critical part to the successful operation of a council is the CEO. And what I mean by that is if you have a crap CEO, you're in real trouble because they ultimately are the ones who do the hiring and firing. The Local Government Act prohibits councillors from being able to intervene in any staffing matters, and it carries significant penalties for that. So it's important that when you are in the council, that you do have a CEO who you know knows all their staff. Greater Dandenong is very, very fortunate with our CEO. Before I was on council, he was actually poached from the city of Manningham. He's served on the executives of LG Pro. He's an engineer by trade. He knows everything in the ins and outs. So he knows how to run a council, knows how councils operate, knows where you can run the operations from it. Where then you get some of the councils like the inner city ones in the city of Yarra, Darebin, those sort of inner city ones. They don't always appoint somebody based upon the best merit, as long as you suit certain criteria for them, whether it could potentially be the gender, could potentially be beliefs, your position, whatever it is. And often that's where a lot of these local governments is important to get involved, because the next thing you know, they're heading down the path of almost pure socialism in a local government perspective, and they're using councils' ratepayers' money to do that.
I think it's good that more and more local councils are now moving to live streaming council meetings directly to Facebook and other social media. That's something I think that the Victorian Houses of Parliament should do. Legislative Assembly and Council should do that. That's been an excellent development. Obviously, when council meetings were allowed to take place in person, there is a public gallery there. What's your, obviously there's been a lot of talk with all the politicians still meeting federally in Canberra and in Victoria, obviously meeting centrally on Spring Street, that there should be allowances for more virtual democracy, because, well, another thing that MPs get into trouble for is their travel allowance. And if there's some sort of, and I'm going to use one of those awful new normal words, hub, if there's some sort of, say, hub chamber where at federal parliament, Victorian MPs could go to participate in federal parliament, votes could still take place, and with the Victorian Parliament as well, because we've seen that the state parliamentary committees have been able to conduct well on Zoom. What do you think about the idea of, I don't want to use the term new normal, but having more virtual democracy to, well, cut down on some of the expenditure, and also increase the transparency as well, so people can tune in on Facebook and YouTube to watch council meetings or other proceedings?
Yeah, so Greater Dandenong, we have our meetings broadcast live. At the moment, they're broadcast live online. We are working towards an integrated platform to broadcast on Facebook. Unfortunately, those systems are quite expensive, but we are actively working through that at the moment. And that's because, look, a lot of people underestimate the power that local government has. They underestimate the actual works and projects that local government has. And I agree that, look, transparency is always good. Now, in local government, the way that the Local Government Act is worded, you cannot be out of pocket for any of your councillor incurred expenses. I personally don't claim any kilometrage to travel from home to the council building for a council meeting, or travel to any of these real functions nearby, and seldom do the majority of my colleagues. A couple do. And look, that's because of the way people sort of look at the options. Some people will take it as a gravy train and will maximise as much as they possibly can get out of it, and that can include domestic trips or interstate for conferences and things. E.g. my Greens colleague, I know he went to Byron Bay for a climate change conference, I believe, and that was all on the ratepayer of Greater Dandenong. I think the ratepayers are really unaware of a lot of the things that go on with local government. And if they were aware, I think it would then shine a light on what has happened in local government, what is happening in local government, and I think it would get people more involved to be more active as well.
Let's turn to some of the politics and demographics in the city of Greater Dandenong. And Dandenong was in the news at the end of August when there was a series of nights of anti-lockdown revolts amongst Albanian, I think there was some Turkish Muslims who decided they would all go out for their hour exercise at the same time. Victoria Police didn't like this. One of the instigators, as they would term them, was I think charged with incitement.
Yep.
Yeah, and we saw broadcast on the news that capsicum spray was used, and it was quite something to behold, because as you mentioned, the city of Greater Dandenong, one of the most multiculturally diverse, and Labor has long thought that they had the multicultural ethnic vote in the bag, but even though those nightly confrontations have now ended, I follow a lot of these local Dandenong Muslims on Facebook, and they still have red hot anger about the continuing lockdown. A lot of them do have their own independent media. They're always raging against dictator Dan. As a local councillor and one who's not bound to Labor Party policy, what's the feedback that you've got?
Yeah, definitely. So Greater Dandenong is Australia's most multicultural municipality. There's over 160 nationalities, over 200 different dialects being spoken. And we are one of arguably Australia's most conservative electorates in the whole country. The city of Greater Dandenong in the same-sex marriage vote overwhelmingly voted no. One of the only two places in the whole state that did that. And generally, you're very much correct that it is a very safe Labor area for the community. What has happened is the Albanian community are very, very active, and they're very savvy when it comes to creating businesses. They want to get in. A lot of them migrated from previously a communist state. They got in and they migrated to Australia. They set up their life. They went into business. They worked very, very, very hard to build where they've got now. The lockdowns that came into place really reasserted to a lot of the multicultural community that it was almost a return of communism coming back. And it was creeping back by having curfews, by not being able to leave your house, by having to go out and having to mandate to wear a mask, to wear all sorts of things to make sure that you didn't get it. And a lot of the residents were giving a bit of pushback towards that. Their businesses have been shut down by the mandatory closures. And so what happened was a couple of residents started to get active. One got particularly active on social media and said, look, can you believe this is what's actually happening? And the other ones were sort of saying, well, I'm at a point where I want to be able to still go out. We're being curfewed down at 1 hour of exercise a day, and we might as well quietly head out and protest, I suppose, in line with following all the guidelines and protest peacefully. So when I went up for one of the walks and I was there walking along, and there was a lot of younger families, there was the grandparents walking around with the younger generation, and everyone was very, very happy. There was an incident that occurred where the police created a blockade in the middle of the street, and tensions flared up there. And as I made several comments to the media outlets, look, I think that it was an overreaction on behalf of Victoria Police to then significantly boost resources. There was something in the vicinity of 50 to 100 police cars. There was over a couple of hundred police members. They've seen horses. They've had the big divvy vans. They've had the public order response crews. They've had the riot crews, you name it. And they've turned out to sort of give pushback to a non-event. In my opinion, if they were able to walk through the streets, they would have gone out and done their walk for the 1 hour. They were all socially distanced. The majority of them were wearing their masks. They were following all the rules and guidelines. And all of a sudden, there's 200 plus police there to basically monitor them. And I think that was a big catalyst to the issues that did occur. But a lot of information has come back to me over the last particularly few months from a lot of the multicultural communities, whether they be from the Slavic region, being Bosnians, Serbians, Croatians, across to the Indians, Pacific Islanders. A lot of them are really, really up in arms. They've seen that their businesses where they work have shut down. They're sitting at home. They're not able to leave. The only time they're able to leave is to go get groceries. And even then, some have said to me that during a minor bit of a panic that the shelves can easily get cleared out. And then it's starting to get a lot of people worried about where things are heading, particularly of recent times. Ones that have got younger children who are supposed to be in education, and they're having to learn from home via Zoom or via Microsoft Teams. And kids are starting to have issues learning and remembering things because they're being stuck and not actually getting out of the house. So I think that the Labor Party has taken for granted a lot of the multicultural community in Victoria for quite some time. And I don't know whether they really will hold on to them at the moment. Certainly, you're right, the state election's 2 years away. You never know where things are going to go, but certainly they're still very, very, very upset.
As we saw earlier this year with the 60 Minutes expose on former local government minister Adam Somniak about the branch stacking that he was organising, he's still an MLC for Southeast Metro, but an independent now. I noticed that he's starting to post some cryptic tweets again, which is quite interesting. But those recordings basically revealed how Labor would use these ethnic communities to, it was all about shoring up the votes and using a lot of these ethnic communities to shore up, well, not just votes at election time, but also pre-selections as well. So has that sort of that expose has it hit some of the communities that were a bit used?
Oh, I think it has. I think there's no doubt, and Adam Somniak, in my belief, certainly acted as much as he possibly could. I think his battle was particularly with the fact that the Labor Party was being hijacked by the Greens. He's a conservative Turkish guy by dead, and I believe by belief as well, he's very conservative. So I think that was something that also sparked it, because Marlene Carews, who was also involved in that branch stacking scandal, was also conservative. And I think that they saw that the Labor Party was being hijacked by the Greens. Certainly, multicultural groups play a significant portion. If you can sign them up, and as you've seen out west, the Labor Party's done a very good job with a lot of the Indian diaspora out there, and they had hundreds of members who joined the Labor Party, and they would turn out to vote at an AGM, and they would turn out to vote, and they would cast votes in several hundreds, and that would be all for specific positions on the executive. And that's where I think things sort of get to the point where politics inevitably is a numbers game, and I think that a lot of the multicultural community who really did bank on them last time would definitely reconsider, if the election was tomorrow, who they'd be voting for.
And we saw a week after local Muslims in Broadmeadows also revolt against the lockdown. I think that they were Lebanese Muslims from memory, but that's another very safe Labor area. A local Labor MP is Frank Maguire, Eddie Maguire's younger brother. Certainly the lockdown enforcement has been particularly more stringently applied in safe labour areas. And we should always remember that, well, it was in the smack bang middle of a safe labour inner Melbourne, where they locked down those public housing towers, basically a stage 5 Wuhan lockdown. They weren't allowed to leave their flats at all. That was, we still need to remember, that was an extraordinary imposition. You wouldn't say imposition, but denial of human rights.
Well, absolutely. And you're right in terms of the Broadmeadows, in terms of Dandenong, where the biggest outbreaks of people who are getting upset are people who are in the safest Labor seats. Now, whether that's because they feel they've been neglected by their Member of Parliament or their values no longer really ally with those of the Labor Party, it's becoming a very interesting time ahead. The Labor Party previously, with John Brumby when he was Premier, and before that, did have some relatively conservative sort of approaches. Steve Bracks had some conservative tendencies as well. And that was something that led to a lot of people still supporting him. Daniel Andrews sits on the socialist left. His radical social agenda is something to be believed out of people just get shocked when you talk about it. I think that's been a big catalyst for people who are starting to wake up and see what is actually going on. People are becoming aware that if they don't start to give pushback and become aware of what is going on, that potentially, we're seeing radical social policy in schools, that kids are then being radicalized with certain views, and that just runs contrary to their beliefs that they've had for a very, very long time. And the Muslim community is very, very socially conservative, very socially conservative. They're ones that I would say almost on belief value should align with conservative right-wing parties more than the left. And I think that's where over the new generation coming through, who are between 18 to 30, are starting to see this, starting to say, well, hold on, you no longer represent my views. So I think we definitely have a lot of work to be done there.
Well, you and I, we're old enough. Well, we grew up with the Bracks Brumby Labor government, which, considering what we have now, it was pretty much a Kennett Light government, a modern social democrat style of government, similar to how Tony Blair ran the United Kingdom when he was Prime Minister. The government was still largely out of your life, just focused on making sure that major events were occurring in Melbourne. There was a successful Commonwealth Games. We got the East Link built. There was also Peninsula Link built, and the Geelong bypass. Just steady, stable government. And look at what the modern Labor government under Daniel Andrews is delivering in 2020. And when he announces a new package or something, that is money that we don't have, that's going to have to be paid back. Bracks and Brumby were pretty fiscally responsible.
They were definitely very, very fiscally responsible. They, whilst at the end of the day, they're still a Labor government and they still delivered some deficits as well during the time, they did pushed very, very hard to make sure that they spent on projects they could afford. Daniel Andrews, in my opinion, has taken a crash and burn approach. He's spent up big, he's borrowed big for a very, very big spending agenda, such as the suburban loop, where there's supposed to be a tunnel train line from Cheltenham all the way around all of the CBD, all the way out to the western suburbs. And those sort of things are very, very, very expensive. The unions have got very big control over the cost of these big projects, and they blow out because the wages are very, very high. They get significant return. And that costs the state government a lot. Daniel Andrews has borrowed a lot of money, and I think now he's getting to the point where he's having to try and figure out where he gets his money from next. I think he had banked a lot on the Wheaton Belt Road Initiative and the partnership that he signed with China. And I think since the federal government announced they're reviewing it, that potentially could be a loss of a significant funding source for the infrastructure that Daniel Andrews wanted to deliver. That, and with the shutdown, the loss of tax revenue coming into the state government must be significant.
Now, as you said, you received a lot of feedback from your constituents, ratepayers, when the Victoria Police crackdown happened in Dandenong. I assume that Labor councillors and the local Labor MPs' officers, Martin Pakula in Dandenong, and it's Gabriella Williams in Dandenong, yep. They would have been receiving calls and emails, a lot of them probably very abusive and threatening. But we have seen all the Labor MPs and by extension ministers just follow the Andrews strategy, the Dan plan. They all obviously in the Labor Party, if you cross the floor, you get expelled. That's not the case in the Liberal and National Party. Surely it is having an impact, well, at least on the staffers in those offices, the feedback that they're getting, they don't seem to be acknowledging any of it, but surely that would be having behind closed doors a serious impact.
Look, you think it would, and I think it's interesting to see how the amount in which they are admitting that they are being inundated with calls and emails, and certainly with the legislation to extend the emergency bill, there was an inundation of, you'd see all the independent MPs were getting bombarded. I think the issue ultimately comes down to the way in which the Labor Party is structured. As you touched on before, the MPs are bound to follow ALP policy. If this was a Liberal Party that was in government, I can almost guarantee you'd have almost a backbench revolt of a stack of MPs trying to force rolling leadership and that sort of thing. The Labor Party, they're all basically in line. They're all towing the same party line. It was mentioned to me that with the Adam Somyurek branch stacking affair, that the Victorian division of the Labor Party being dissolved, and those matters are now basically being run out of the Federal Secretariat. And the Federal Secretariat is controlled by the Socialist Left and Anthony Albanese. And if they wanted to maintain their pre-selection, then that was something that they had to follow the line. The issue that I think has certainly become in politics, in state politics over the recent years, is we're having a lot of people that are becoming careerist politicians who want to get in, they want to spend their whole career being a member of parliament. They don't deliver significant agenda that they've set out to do. They just want to basically sit in their seat, collect the salary and relax. And I think that's something that, and they also then from there don't want to lose their seat, because to lose the seat, just lose their job, and they don't want to do that. So that's why we see a lot of leadership tensions, people trying to swap leaders out during party room challenges and things. I think that's why the Labor Party changed their constitution to make it harder for Labor MPs to try and roll the Premier or the leader of the opposition to protect them.
Does that, I know that the Federal Labor Party has that now rule, but does the Victorian Labor caucus have that rule as well?
I believe they do. Unfortunately, I'm not a member of the Labor Party, so I wouldn't know the full internal workings. But my understanding is that there requires a significant majority of the Labor MPs to sign to then have a call a party room meeting to spill the leadership. So I think that's why I think he's doing a phenomenal job at causing a lot of issues for the sitting MPs who must look at their internal polling of their seats and have sleepless nights. But I think he's in a position where he wields significant power, and they're arguably too scared, saying, well, even if I speak out, if I lose my endorsement, then I've got nothing left.
You refer to Daniel Andrews then?
Yeah, look, I think so. I think a lot of MPs are aware if they speak out against Daniel Andrews, they speak out against the government policy, they say it's crazy, as you said, they're going to get sanctioned. They can lose their membership of the ALP, or if they could then potentially face a challenge. And the way that the Labor Party is structured, whilst the members have a vote, the unions still carry considerable power. And that needs to be endorsed by the state executive to give you your position as an MP. And I really don't think that that's a case of something happening.
And Dictator Dan, it's not just a nickname. It basically, the whole government is run by him and his office. And as we saw during the coronavirus response, the cabinet was shrunk to that gang of 8, but it doesn't seem, well, we see Daniel Andrews every day. We occasionally see Jenny Mikakos, Tim Pallas, Martin Pakula, James Molino, but despite the concern about Victoria Police's enforcement of the lockdown rules, we haven't seen Lisa Neville for ages.
No, well, look, I think it's the Labor Party and the way that they run their operations is incredibly orchestrated. Everything that you see has been well planned out, well thought out by people who work in the Department of Premier and Cabinet, that may be the ministerial advisors. So you're seldom going to get actually what you want from them. That's why every time Daniel Andrews fronts a press conference, he wears something different. And he wears something different, whether it be a suit or whether it be a jacket, the North Face, to accommodate to whether it's a weekend or midweek. Now, that's something that, without question, has been something that's been advised to him, and he's then implementing that. And the same thing with Lisa Neville, with Jenny Mikakos. The reason why they're not fronting the media, in my opinion, is because there's a lot of questions to be answered, and they don't want to answer those questions. And if you don't appear, then you don't have to answer the questions.
And I know that you talk about the North Face jacket, which has become somewhat of a cultural icon now. I remember because social media is lit at the moment with Dan Andrews stuff, that if the press conference is later in the day and he's wearing a suit on a weekend, then you know that he's going to announce something bad.
Yep. Correct. And that's all been orchestrated out. It all provides subliminal messaging. It sets a tone. It sets a precedence. People then know what they're going to expect. And that is how this sort of thing rolls down, because people then go, okay, this is what we're going to do. Let's go from there. And then they will plan every single move out, very much like the President of the United States. Every single move is planned out. What they're going to say is planned out, and that is done and orchestrated to a T.
And he has 64 staffers in his Department of Premier, which is 13 more than the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, who has 51.
Yep, correct. And those advisors have all got their set role. They've got their responsibilities, and their job is to provide information or ideas or thoughts, and then basically to be carried on onto the MP. So whether it be Daniel Andrews and all of his advisors, we'll have one that will advise on social policy, one that will advise on financial policy, one that will advise on different things, and then ones that he'll do in his inner circle, no doubt, who say, you should do this, you should do that, you should wear this, and go from there.
Now, the Victorian Liberal Party has been described for many years as mediocre, and based on the 2018 state election performance, it was nearly a wipeout with the swing against the Liberals and National. And basically it came down to that they just weren't visible. They they just didn't have many strong performers. They weren't getting a message out. But they appear, as Dan Andrews has nearly done everything wrong during both the first and second wave, that a Victorian Parliamentary Liberal Party has finally awakened from its slumber. And it seemed to be triggered back in May by a tweet from Tim Smith, who's the Shadow Planning Minister, who, because Dan Andrews, when he relaxed the first lockdown, where you're allowed to have 5 visitors at your home, but pubs, clubs and restaurants couldn't open because in his opinion, it wasn't viable for them to open with 10 patrons, even though Daniel Andrews has never run a small business, but he, as we've shown, as he's demonstrated, he is the decider. Based on his opinion, it's decided. Tim Smith called him a friendless loser and who'd want to have a drink with Lurch, and with the hashtag Dan has no friends. And so all right, we're back now. Sorry about that, everyone. The connection cut out for a moment. There was nothing sinister in it. It was a dislodged cord. But I'll start back where we left off. So I was talking about Tim Smith's. It was, in my opinion, it was a Trump-like tweet. And I remember when Tim Smith on Mother's Day initially went off at Daniel Andrews, he was slapped down by the opposition leader, Michael O'Brien. But after that tweet from Tim, Michael O'Brien decided, no, that's actually a good idea to go hard against Dan. And it's Michael O'Brien has really come into his element. I see him constantly on the news, very present on social media, getting the message out there, putting an alternative plan out there. And it seems that basically the Dan show unraveling, that it's finally put a firecracker up the Victorian Liberal Party, and they're out finally there, got some fire in them now and taking a stand.
Yeah, correct. Look, I think that the Daniel Andrews in the last election, he ran a very big campaign when it came to infrastructure. And that was something a lot of people saw, and he ran a very good campaign. And with the loss of that, we lost a lot of good quality MPs, a lot of Conservatives as well. And with the loss of that, we lost a lot of voice because the resources having less MPs means you're really limited to what you can do. And I think the Liberal Party suffered a bit of shock given how big the swing was against the Liberal Party. And for quite some time, they went a bit quiet and sort of took a step back and did a bit of reassessment. And I think that since this whole debacle started, and the pandemic's been running through the community and things, so the Liberal Party certainly is now starting to realise and wake up and say, okay, this is how we need to set the strategy, and this is what we need to do, and this is how we can actually start to get back into the game. Because historically, the Liberal Party does very well in federal government, and we've dominated the federal government for a very long time. But when it comes to state governments, forever and a day, we always seem to have a weakness there. It seems to be something I'm not sure whether we don't put enough resources in or whether we don't target the area correctly. But we seem to fall behind. And I think, it's something that over the last 25 years, we've spent 4 or 6 or something in government. Now, that's pretty poor. But I think it's the new generation as well of MPs who are joining the Liberal Party, becoming members of Parliament, getting involved, have a different approach. They're gone to the days where we're having a very conservative sort of approach where we and and think about things concisely. Now I think we're returning fire to the Labor Party, who themselves play very, very dirty. They would hammer the same thing time and time again, making accusations which weren't thoroughly correct, but it was enough to carry the weight. So I think what we will definitely see over the next couple of years, and hopefully led to the next state election, is the ramping up of holding the Labor Party to account, really pushing hard to make sure that the people are being represented, people's voices are being heard, and then hopefully you will experience a swing back to the Liberal Party and reclaim a few more seats.
Because during the Bellew-Napthine one term of government from 2010 to 2014, most of the cabinet and ministry was leftovers from the Kennett years, and obviously that was a good government. That was a good government, but when you have these aging faces, it's basic. There's no renewal, and obviously to be turfed out after one term in 2014 and need to find the next generation, that's particularly difficult. You don't just need good fresh young candidates, but you also need fiery ones as well. And obviously 2014 was before the Trump age, where he showed that you can be this bombastic outspoken maverick person and still win. And obviously with Tim Smith's tweet, which I call it basically the trigger point, it has finally sort of brought the Victorian Liberal Party out of this safe approach. And I remember back in 2014, this was when the young aspiring politicians were getting caught out saying non-politically correct stuff on social media. One of the 2014 Victorian Liberal candidates, Aaron Lane, had to quit because he used the term faggots twice on Twitter. And even they tried to cut down your political career based on some Facebook screenshots which you posted in a Facebook group where you criticized butchy lesbians and didn't like body hair on women, which obviously it's a banterish Facebook discussion. But this type of, we can't have this sort of colorful language and that we must have the most bland and boring people possible. This is part of why the Liberal Party became irrelevant. And obviously that, basically BS scandal, it didn't hinder your political aspirations. You got elected as a councillor in 2016.
I think it's been very interesting times. I joined the Liberal Party in 2011, at the start of 2011. I was not very political in high school. I was actually wanted to become a chef, and I left high school and sort of pursued that, dropped out, and politics was something that came later down the track. And I think the new generation, what we're seeing is quite a different story to the previous generations. In the older generations, they would go down to the pub, there'd be pub chat in the afternoon, everyone go on to work, and then between 4 and 6 before they went home for dinner, the people would go down to the pub, they'd have chit chat, and then have commentary. The new generation are the first generation that use social media. Now, across all political parties, the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, the Greens, every single party has been tripped up by candidates, by MPs who have made comments in the past on social media. And being the first generation of people who use social media, I don't think anybody quite realised what comments you would make and how they would come back potentially to haunt you down the track. Now, in 2014, I made some comments. Those comments were screenshotted as part of an internal dispute within the Labor Party and were then sent to the Age, courtesy of the opposing faction. And from there, look, there was an Age article in the lead up to the state election. It was not a very good article. And it was done, and it did cause a lot of damage to people's personal lives as well. I know that there's been some really good people who I was in uni politics with who would have become excellent people in business, excellent people chasing political futures. And they would make comments that would then be screenshotted, sent to the media outlets, and it would cause them significant damage, not only to their careers, but also to their personal lives, the stress that puts on you, seeing that an article is published with your name and pictures and those sort of things. It can cause a lot of damage. And that was the way that certainly some political groups play. They play very, very dirty. I think it's something that certainly I was not the first. I will certainly not be the last. And there's going to be a lot more people that we will see over the next few elections that come into play, where they've commented on something, on another photo, in an internal post, on another post somewhere else that somebody digs up and they play dirty with and they use it against somebody. We saw it with a candidate who ran for the Labor Party in Melbourne. He made comments, I think 12 years ago, before the last state election, so it'd be 16 years ago, where he had queried something, and all of a sudden there was big pressure to have him disendorsed by both parties, and it all went down south and basically destroyed this guy's career and his life. I was fortunate enough to be a time where I was young and I was stupid and that sort of thing, and then I was able to understand exactly how things work, to get back involved and to not then let that succumb to what your past is, not your future. And to then get back involved, say, well, I'm going to represent my community, and to go from there. And at no point will I ever stop. By default, I'm a conservative, and I'll always argue for conservative values. And I'm not a person that's going to step back and then say, okay, yep, we'll just backtrack that because it's the wrong thing to say. And I think that we will definitely see, as I said, over future generations, over the next few election cycles, that there'll be more and more candidates that'll get tripped up.
And it's a term of, because the media, they learnt to love these gotcha social media moments. But obviously, as an observer and a reporter myself of politics, these things blow over if you just don't panic. And obviously, as I mentioned, you came through it easily. You got elected as a councillor. The other person that I mentioned, Aaron Lane, he's still very active in Liberal Party, still got a bright future ahead of him, which is great. And I haven't asked for your opinion on it. Tim Smith's initial tweets, and basically Michael O'Brien in the end not sort of slapping him down. You consider that basically a positive development for this sort of more fiery strategy?
Look, I think it's worthwhile seeing where these sort of things go. The only way you can know whether they're successful is to see how the return is. In my personal opinion, I can't stand Twitter. I think it's the shittiest thing on earth. Twitter is full of lefties, and you just go there just to war. You never really win. People argue, and you cannot really make any common sense approach on Twitter without being slammed by lefties across the world. And so I've generally steered relatively clear away from Twitter. I think it'll be interesting to see how that carries through. And I think the key area for the Liberal Party to form government, to win back, is to target the communities who have been hit the hardest. So really, where the Liberal Party, in my opinion, has really dropped the ball is with the multicultural communities. Multicultural communities, as I said previously, by default, they're socially conservative. They want to come, they want to just quietly start their own businesses, earn their money, raise their family, live in peace and harmony. They don't want to have their kids susceptible and exposed to the radical safe schools, respectful relationships agenda that is forced upon their kids. They just want to live harmoniously. And I think that's an area where the Liberal Party really hasn't quite targeted very well. It's an area that they have just let go whilst they chase marginal seats. They chase the electorates of Mordialloc, of Carrum, and they chase key little projects to try and win votes, versus actually going back to the core beliefs of people and saying, well, we represent the majority. And the Labor Party, I think, has tried to do that to some extent, not very well. but there's definitely scope to be able to properly do that. The other thing is that, as I said before, the Parliamentary Liberal Party, a lot of MPs have been there for a very, very, very long time. The Australian Institute of Company Directors says that the maximum time you should ever serve as a director of a company or involved as a leader of an organisation is between 8 to 12 years. Now that would be 4 terms, being 4 years each. So 3 terms, sorry, being 4 years each, 4 at 12. And that would then allow them to get in, do whatever policies they need to, try and deliver whatever they can, and then time to move on to your next venture. And I think that's a key part versus being there for 25 years and then actually no longer representing the constituents that are there. And that's becomes a bit of a concern for the new generation who of the millennials who like us, who want jobs. We want secure jobs. We want affordable housing. We want to be able to live harmoniously. We want to be able to ensure that we have everything that we possibly need. And things that we believe in, things we want, particularly freedom of the press. You be able to use social media. Like at the moment, you can't even make a Facebook post without potentially having Victoria Police come bang down your door and charge you with incitement. Those sort of things carry very, very deep to the millennial generation. And I think it's something that needs to be really pushed to show that this is actually what represents us.
Going back to Twitter, I think the Labor Party and by extension Andrews, they've fallen for the fallacy that Twitter is real life, because the I Stand With Dan hashtag, it was there for so long during the initial of the second wave, but I've noticed as a user of both Facebook and Twitter, the anti-Dan, the dictator Dan, which I should mention was actually first coined by Liberal MLC Bernie Finn, who also calls him Despot Dan. I know that Tim Smith has settled on Chairman Dan, but the I Stand With Dan cult is crumbling, and they're becoming more and more exposing their cult-like tendencies, and they will just defend every action statement that Dan Andrews makes, believe his dishonest and misleading statements about hotel quarantine or what who came up with a curfew, so much where these were the same people 3 months ago who were demanding Victoria Police be defunded, and now they're supporting Victoria Police, well, the incitement charges and the riot squad shutting down these anti-lockdown protesters. And obviously this this sort of I Stand With Dan cult culminated with a Victoria Police vehicle hitting a mentally ill man, and then his head being stomped on. I noticed I Stand With Dan Colders thinking that he was a COVIDiot anti-lockdown protester, and was saying, yeah, Victoria Police, they did a good job there. That's how unhinged and cult-like they became, when no, this had nothing to do with lockdown. He wasn't a COVIDiot. He was suffering a bipolar episode, and this pandemic has just exposed just how detached from any sort of objectivity his supporters are, and by extension just reinforces that and Andrews and his people, they've just got this narrow focus and they don't want to listen to anything else.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. Look, the Twitterverse, if that's what it's called, Twittersphere, certainly is something that is controlled by the left. The left has dominated it since almost its inception. You can try and have a tweet debate, you can tweet off back and forth and wage a bit of a war, but ultimately they're never going to swap what they believe in. And it's a pointless exercise because you're never going to try and sway them. They're always going to.
I know that. I'm just pointing out that just the absurd mental gymnastics they've got to.
Correct. And I think that these people have followed suit time and time again. There's never going to change their stripes, but now they're getting stuck because now they're realizing that that everything that they've always been pushing for, that I believe in Dan, is actually not all that they believe in. When you see the incidents that have been occurring where you can no longer make a Facebook post without Victoria Police coming in, kicking in your door, as we saw in that guy in Ballarat, and the woman who was pregnant being handcuffed with 6 or 7 police in the house, people can sort of look at that and actually go, hold on a second, what is going on here? How come you're arresting a pregnant woman in her pajamas for making a Facebook post? And I think that's when the left get really, really confused where they're actually ideologically stand. They will die in a ditch before they dump Dan, and it's always, I love Dan. But when it goes the other way and it actually contradicts their values, they start to get very agile. They get very agitated and they go, oh, I don't really want to talk about this, or they'll try and redirect it to something else. And I think you're right that they have based a lot of their policies around what they're seeing on the Twitter sphere versus actually what is going on the ground. We have the Greens candidate for the Keysborough South Ward, which is not a ward near me, and she's running for that area there. And she sent out a tweet that said they called the Albanian Muslims in Dandenong and said that they're white supremacists. Now that was in screenshot, and there was a whole lot of comments about that. And they were saying, well, hold on, we're actually not white supremacists. We're migrants from Albania, for starters.
Oh, but they were proud of being Australian. During their walk, they were playing the Australian anthem with Australian flags. So they therefore don't become, they're not Muslims for that period of time, and they automatically, their skin becomes whiter. That's how it works.
Absolutely, absolutely. And no matter what it is, the media will work to twist it. The Age is most prolific and the Daily Mail is probably not too far behind. And they will deliberately write things and then skew it in a way that makes something completely irrelevant to what was actually going on. The same way that you saw the Age saying, oh, you know, these riots in Dandenong, they're out of control. There's this and that. There's capsicum spray being going. There's full riots going on. You go down there and there's maybe 10 people yelling, 20, 30, 40 people who are yelling after one person gets slammed to the ground. Hardly a riot. But the media sensationalizes, and the Age has done a very good job at sensationalizing that sort of thing. And I think that you're right that the Twitter sphere these days, people will send tweets out. It spreads very, very quickly. And these days, there's a whole lot of information flying around. It's very hard to prove which is correct.
And as I mentioned, with the scrutiny increasing on Victoria Police, and I mentioned that abhorrent footage of that mentally ill man getting hit and stomped on, that we're seeing the Victorian community lose confidence and actually be scared of the Victoria Police now. And we've seen heaps of videos now of people being questioned, well, for not wearing masks correctly. There was another pregnant woman who was told that she couldn't sit down on a park bench while she was out exercising. And obviously we want to avoid what's happening in the United States with the debate and also what's happening on the streets with the police. We want we want a strong and fair police force, and it's very concerning when you see this loss of confidence in the police. And I should mention that we have Blue Ribbon Day on September 28th, and I'd be interested to know what sort of the sales are like of blue ribbons this year compared to last year.
Yeah, look, I think Victoria Police over the last few years has somewhat changed from where they used to be. And I think, look, there's a lot of very good members, and I've always been a very strong supporter of Victoria Police and their operations, what they do. And invariably, being a police officer, in my opinion, is a shit job. Dealing with people that you deal with every day in a high stressful environment certainly is not something that I would like to be a member of. Where I think the issue is that the level of people that they're pushing through the academy at the moment is quite high. It's very, very high. These people are then being pushed through as quick as they possibly can. They're graduating, they're going through their course, they're being issued their firearm, their badge, their uniform. And I think that they need to learn a lot from the older members as well. The older members of the police force know how things fall apart. They know how things deal. They know to monitor before you react. And I think what we've seen is a lot of the younger members who join, there's certainly a group who become quite aggressive, and you see that recently with some of the media coverage. And I think that the issue is when Victoria Police loses respect of the community, there's a whole lot of issues that form. And I think it's important that the Force Command actually then starts to realise that there's an issue and starts to realise what they need to do to improve it. And they need to move quite quick, because when things go wrong, they can go very wrong very quick. And we've seen that with the Victoria Police, with as I said, the one who was bipolar, and I've seen the footage where the guy stomped on his head, and I think that was outrageous. And I can completely see why there's an investigation into the Professional Services Command. But
well, it's now at IBAC now, which is the Independent Broad-Based Anti-Corruption Independent Criminal Investigation.
Yeah, and look, and I think that also comments by chief commissioners calling people who have raised concerns about the lockdown tinfoil hat,
Yeah, batshit crazy.
batshit crazy. That does nobody any good. Nobody at any good at all. All that does is then just further disrespects the work that Victoria Police do and the hard members do by a member of the I suppose the force command making comments about that. Now, they're not people that are complete loony, anti-vaxxing people. They're people who are actually concerned that their businesses and their livelihoods are going down the drain. They're people that are concerned that their kids are not receiving the right education. They're people that are concerned they may not be able to pay their bills. They're not people who are anti-vaxxing, far left, people who are skeptics across everything. And I think that's becoming an issue with Victoria Police. You also see that they've taken very, very strong stances with their policies, now allowing members to wear rainbow epaulets on their uniform, signifying that they're members of the LGBTI core. They're allowing their members to have safe days and safe spaces and that sort of thing. And that's not the core of Victoria Police. The core of Victoria Police is their motto, which is uphold the right. And that's to ensure that they go out and actually protect the community. And I think that that's a big issue of a lot of these government departments, is now they progress so far to the left in their social policies as well, actually forgetting what their main priority is.
I noticed it was there was a recent live video which a woman filmed inside Dandenong police station. She was talking to them about the mask mandate, and I noticed that there was a rainbow flag in where the reception area is, and to me it was sort of like we're at stage 3 lockdown during that time. This is Dandenong police station and you've got a rainbow flag there.
Well, look, my understanding is that Victoria Police employs sworn police officers who are the LGBTI liaison officers, and their job is to basically represent the LGBTI community and to provide, I suppose, if people identify as LGBTIQ, I believe they have access to them, that staff member. But that's really, I think it's a complete overreach of what Victoria Police is there to do. And I've seen the rainbow flag in several police stations. I know it's in Moorabbin Police Station as well. And I think that's certainly something that needs to be addressed, because it's now leaving the proviso of what Victoria Police is. It's creating a socialist utopia, in my opinion, saying that they now sit with the radical left. And, you know, if you identify as LGBTI and your feelings are hurt, you can now go to this special police officer and they'll investigate on your behalf. What should be happening is that every single Victorian should be treated equally under the law. And the law should not be discriminated to any one way or another, regardless of gender, sex, whatever. I think that's where we're starting to see a lot of these issues that are rising from organisations that have been significantly infiltrated by the left, if you will.
Now, with this stage 4 lockdown continuing, scheduled to go for at least another 6 weeks, even though we're getting consistent daily cases now under 50. It was 42 today, though you always have to look at how the overall increases, because it increased by 32 today. They say it's because of reclassification, but a lot of the time it's due to false positives or duplication. So the curve is getting quite flat, but Dan's roadmap is basically an elimination strategy. And Victorian Liberal and National Party, they made it very clear from the beginning that they would vote no, and they did vote no to the state of emergency extension. There was an excellent speech against it by former Liberal leader Matthew Guy. I just wish he'd made a speech like that 2 years ago when it really counted. And obviously the opposition was vindicated when he got his 6-month extension. He hadn't revealed any of his roadmap at all, and we're finally seeing now some legal challenges to the current lockdown. The Mornington Peninsula restaurant owner, Michelle Lero, who, she's a Liberal Party member, but that doesn't discount the merits of her lawsuit against the curfew, because the thing is, about the curfew, we learned it wasn't the advice of the Chief Health Officer nor Victoria Police. And the state of emergency provisions under the Public Health and Wellbeing Act, you have to follow the Chief Health Officer's directions. And if it's not something that he recommended, then there's a lot of question about how it can be lawful.
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be very interesting to see the legalities of how that plays out. I think that there is going to be some real issues coming forward, and some of these court cases are backed by very strong QCs. Inevitably, I think that that's going to become quite an issue as well, is to see how they play out. And certainly, there's people didn't do things, people did do other things, and I think it's going to be very, very exciting times to see where this ends up.
As I mentioned, it's come to light that Brett Sutton, or he didn't make the decision about the curfew. You wonder what other decisions have been made about the state of emergency under the Public Health and Wellbeing Act that have actually been a captain's call, or dare I say dictatorial decree under Dan Andrews, that haven't been recommended by Dr. Brett Sutton, which there are legitimate questions whether they're lawful. And I don't know why it's sort of taken this, well, obviously it's taken a while for the proper information to get out. We still see Dan Andrews trying to weasel his way through things, particularly his claim that ADF support wasn't on offer, but it's certainly, things need to be tested in the courts.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. I think that there is a lot of questions that need to be answered. There's a lot of questions which clearly now during the judicial inquiry coming out, which is actually raising a lot of concern. The fact that originally we were hearing that it was the Chief Health Officer's recommendation, then it was Victoria Police's recommendation, then it was another recommendation. Now we're finding out that it was actually the Premier's recommendation. The Premier did the curfew on his own accord with nobody recommending it or advising it that it was a good idea. It just shows how convoluted it's become and how misleading the information is being pushed around in the environment at the moment. Once the truth starts to come out, it raises even more questions. The fact that the Chief Health Officer hasn't made these agreements, hasn't agreed to the lockdown, hasn't agreed to the curfew, and is sort of towing the line is quite concerning as well, because the Premier has been using his super cabinet of 8, as he touched on before, to basically control all of the people in the state of Victoria. Now, that's no doubt no doubt exactly why there's a lot of people who are currently going to Darwin into the Howard Springs Centre there, quarantined for 14 days and going to another state, because they're simply going, this is ridiculous. Clearly, information is being misled. We're being forced against our will to deal with these issues, and we've got no recourse.
Well, at the moment, there is no hotel quarantine program in Melbourne due to, the fact that this second wave, 99% of the cases in the second outbreak can genomically link to Ridges Hotel on Swanston Street, which is incredible. But there was widespread systematic failure where we still don't know who was in charge. And Dan Andrews claims that he doesn't know who made the decision to use security guards at hotel quarantine. He still doesn't know who advised him about the curfew. But this is also having the hotel quarantine stuff up national knock-on effects, that there are a lot of Australians who cannot get home because of the caps other states have put on, because they don't want a hotel quarantine outbreak like Victoria. We've had the Queensland state hard border come back up with cruel and heartless consequences. So it's obviously Melburnians are suffering the worst, but it's having a national impact, particularly on the federal budget as well.
Oh, absolutely. Look, it's having an impact across all different budgets. In Greater Dandenong, just to our municipality, and we've had a lot of recent outbreaks. The Chief Health Officer has dictated opening up 2 new testing stations in Greater Dandenong. Just to our local government budget alone, we've copped a $10 million hit. And now that may sound like something that $10 million is basically 17th of our total operating budget. Now that's a significant hit to our bottom line, but we are one of 79 municipalities that have been hit hard. Now, if you also then don't have people going to work, then taxes aren't being paid. People aren't going shopping, people aren't buying things, no GST revenues coming in. The actual issue and the actual damage that's being done to the economy, in my opinion, is still completely immeasurable. And we won't know exactly how much damage has been done until we see, say, a year down the track or a couple of years down the track, and we actually see where the economy is sitting. How many companies have collapsed? How much tax revenue are we down? And how long is it going to take to pay back the significant amount of money that we're now in debt.
So as I said before, one of the positives that is going to come out of this is the rise of the more informed voter, because nobody's had this level of government intrusion into their lives before. A lot of people have had their livelihoods destroyed because the government forced their businesses to shut and made practicing their businesses illegal. And so we're certainly going to see, as the title of my show is, elections, they always have consequences, but more people are going to realize that now. I mentioned the court actions now, but we're seeing much more grassroots and online activism, which is still lawful. We've obviously Gideon Rosner from the Institute of Public Affairs, with his IPA with You daily podcast, has been communicating a lot of people's frustrations through the IPA's multi-social media network. Yes, Gideon Rosner did run for Liberal pre-selection last election, but that doesn't discount as he says. The same with Edward Burke, the 19-year-old Liberal Party member who's started Victoria Ford. The Give Dan the Boot campaign with the boots outside on Sunday was quite successful, and there's also the Reignite Democracy campaign on Facebook, which has blossomed as well. We've got Change Victoria, the lobby group of the hospitality industry, and the COVID Doctors Network, who talk about the harms with the continuing lockdown.
Yeah, look, I think we will definitely start to see a lot of these groups who are backed by people who actually have specialists in this sector and in the sectors that they're representing, and they're going to become quite active. And I think they'll give a lot of pushback, which would be good, to say a lot of the unions who are involved, because you see the Australian nurses, midwiferys, ANMF, I think they're called, they put out all these press releases saying how good Daniel Andrews is, that he's affecting lives and things. And they completely discount the fact that there's, without question, the mental health implications are skyrocketing. They put things that represent their members. And now you see that there's, I think it was 500 odd doctors who signed a statement saying that the rules that's currently being implemented is ineffective. So I think that what we will see over the next, hopefully the next couple of years, and hopefully the start of the future, will be the start of these groups who become quite active, who become active in pushing the conservative point of view, pushing the views of people who actually are affected by these issues versus just towing a party line of radical socialist policies. I think will be a good thing, because certainly I've seen the Victoria Forward and Edward Burke has done an excellent job being able to really start to set the stage of what we will see. And I think, as I said, what we'll see over the next few years will be new groups lodging, representing different groups who have actually got teeth. The National Farmers Federation, I think that they do bits and pieces, but they could be a lot more active. And there'll probably be another group that'll come out of that and be even more aggressive.
And talking about Change Victoria, which is the Reopen Hospitality lobby group that's being fronted by Paul DiMartino, a pub owner in South Melbourne, ex-footballer. He's been doing fantastic media, communicating hospitality owners and operators' frustrations. I can only imagine what they're going through at the moment, and they don't know, well, it's the Andrews government. They decree things, but they know nothing about business with this outdoor dining plan for the summer. The businesses don't know, well, what are the rules going to be about it? Well, I still have to get all these permits and that. So there is definitely more industry and business speaking up.
And look, that's what we're trying to work through at the moment. To give you a council perspective, we've got a lot of operators. We're a very big commercial hub. We've got a lot of food businesses, and now we're hearing that we need to do outdoor seating. Well, how do we do outdoor seating? What does outdoor seating look like? Where does it go? How do we do it? How do we expedite the planning process to get the permits to make sure that then they can actually have outdoor seating? It's not to earn money again. We want to make sure that we can streamline this as quick as possible. But unfortunately, the issue is that a lot of it's policy on the run by the state government. So you become sort of at mercy of them.
We've seen that so much during this pandemic, not just from the Victorian state government, but other state governments and federally as well. They've just made it up as they go along. That's why I call what we're in at the moment stage 3.9, because it's different from the stage 3 we were in before, and there's no. They just introduce these new steps or whatever. It's as it's termed. It's labeling messaging gone mad.
Absolutely, no question about that at all. And it's just going to be a matter of, I suppose, keep pushing to see where we end up in the future.
Well, it's been great to chat with you tonight, Timothy. Sorry about a few technical issues, but I thought we had a great chat. The ballots will, VEC says, will begin to arrive early October.
The VEC said they're going out on the 6th of October.
6th of October. And they have to be due back, it says, what is it? The cutoff is October 24th, which is a Friday at 6 p.m. Isn't that also supposed to be the public holiday for well, it's not grand final leave, but the
thank you day or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, it is. So look, it's going to be very, very critical, and I encourage everybody who gets a vote to cast your vote. Make sure you post it back and don't forget.
Friday, 23rd of October, I should say.
Friday, 23rd, yeah. Make sure you do cast your vote. If you don't cast a vote and you get a letter from the Electoral Commission, it does carry infringement. So the last thing you want to do is to get fined.
Yeah, if there haven't been enough threats to be fined this year already.
Exactly right. Exactly. So no, look, definitely have a look. All I can say is research your candidates, find which ones are the runners for the Labor Party, which ones are proper, ones who are conservative, and then definitely cast your vote accordingly.
And the cutoff 6 p.m. Friday 23rd of October, because it's mail-in. I didn't even know this because it's 4 years since I saw a council voting ballot. Is it time stamped, or how does it work?
No, well, that's the time in which I think they're going to collect the letters and then go from there. I don't think you'll find there'll be a timestamp on it of when it went through the mail house. What they're trying to do is to make sure that when they mail it out between the 6th to the 8th of October and you get it, that you return it as soon as possible. The last thing you want is more and more postal votes flowing into November and then having all sorts of issues. And we saw that recently with the Northern Territory election, where I think we waited almost another week while they counted votes, and all of a sudden somebody get 10 votes and then pull ahead of another 5 votes and then go back the other way. So I think it's definitely just making sure that they've got enough votes counted and they come back in time to count them and declare the council as elected.
Which is the fear that many in the United States have with the mail-in ballots this November. They're going to know who is elected president on the evening of November the 3rd.
Correct. And that's going to be very, very interesting, because the Democrats are saying that they're hell-bent sure that they're going to get the majority of the postal and win. But I think it's going to be very, very interesting. And look, I certainly think that Donald Trump will be re-elected. I think he'll be re-elected on a significant margin, but only time will tell.
Exactly. Well, once again, thanks for your time. Thanks to the audience for sticking with us throughout the show. And of course, I'll be back tomorrow night for the Uncuckables, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time on the show, YouTube and DLive. And then Trad Tasman talk again on the Unshacked's YouTube channel, 6 p.m. Melbourne time. And of course, keep checking out the unshackled.net. We've still got plenty of news and commentary. Lucas Roses, our Antifa hitman, has been busy exposing who the Marxist candidates are in these local government elections. So it's worth checking those out if you live in those inner suburbs. You're not accidentally voting for a Marxist. And I intend to have him on WilmsFront very soon to talk about some of these candidates and characters. Thanks again for your time. WilmsFront will be back again next Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Melbourne time on YouTube and DLive, sticking with the weekly show for now. So I'll see you next Wednesday for WilmsFront, and of course I'll see you tomorrow night for the Uncuckables.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting theunshackled.net to view all our shows. And to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.